Welcome to today's seminar. My name is Nancy Holm. I'm the Sponsored Research Coordinator here at ISDC and also a co-coordinator for our Sustainable Electronics Initiative, along with Joy Scrobham, who's here in the front. So I want to welcome those of you who are here in our audience and also those who are viewing this online today. Today's seminar focuses on sustainable electronics. This work is part of a student research project that's been led by Professor William Bullock, who's here with us. He's in the Department of Industrial Design at the U of I. And the project was sponsored by ISTC's Sustainable Electronics Initiative with funding from Dell Corporation. For those interested, this seminar will be archived on our ISTC website later in the next few days. And ISTC will also be hosting a series of webinars on e-waste and sustainable electronics this fall, beginning in September, and then that will culminate in early December, where we'll be showing the videos of the winning international e-waste design competition that we have. This is sponsored by SEI, and that competition is open to all college students or recent graduates worldwide, with cash prizes awarded. If any of you are interested or would have students who are interested in that, you can see the link on our ISTC website for the International Design Competition. Now, before I introduce the 4 students who will be giving the presentation today, I want to welcome Dr. Howard Gunther, who's here with us. He's the Associate Vice Chancellor for Research at the U of I. He will give a few opening remarks. Dr. Gunther has a keen interest in sustainable electronics research and education, and he's been very supportive of our program here at ISDC. So Dr. Gunther. I got it. There you go. Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I know that's what people always say, but it's really true in this case. I enjoy being here. As you all know, the problem of electronic waste is a huge concern in this country and nationwide. And the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, I believe, is uniquely poised to handle and address these issues, not just from a technological standpoint, but from a social sciences standpoint, humanistic standpoint. We have it all here. We are a center of interdisciplinary research, and sustainable electronics, e-waste, and the environment really are indicative of a lot of the interdisciplinary potential that we have at this campus. I was delighted that William put on this session. William is one of the co-founders of the electronic e-waste initiative here on campus. He was one of a group of 3 people that really got this rolling early on. Look back, it was 2009 when we had our first meetings about this. And William, along with 2 other people, Willie Cade up in Chicago, is a businessman and activist up there. He's been very active, along with Tim Lindsay, who used to be at the ISTC here and is now at Caterpillar. The 3 of them were a team that got a lot of this going. They started a lot of the design competitions, put on a number of classes here on campus. They had a number of symposia, have been really active at the federal level to initiate legislation and at the state level to fight that morass of getting state funding through here. So it's really put us at, I think, one of the lead positions in the nation as far as electronic waste and a lot of the potential. This campus, I think, is really a great place to be at for these types of innovations. William also started the Product Innovation Research Laboratory, or PEARL, and I was delighted to see that there's been some projects and things that are going on for that laboratory, and I look forward to the projects that are going to be described today. So thank you for putting on this session.
So thank you, Dr. Gunther. Now I'd like to introduce the 5 or 4 students who are here with us today, who will be giving a talk on their presentation for the project they worked on this past semester. But before I do that, I just want to mention to everyone that we'll hold our questions till the end today, and we have a microphone that we'll pass around so that we can pick up the questions better for our audio taping. And then also for those who are viewing online, we'll let you type in any questions you have, and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar also. So we have 4 members of the team of 15 students who worked with Dr. Bullock and several other faculty members this semester on the project. And those students are Ehsan Noursalehi, Kristina Schiller, Rick Maturo, and Kagan McDaniel. And we're going to start off with Ehsan to begin the presentation, and then the other students will come in and talk about their different sections of the research project. So Ehsan,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Ehsan, and I did my undergrad here in material science and engineering, and that's one of the first I got exposed to Perl. It was a course that came to one of the entrepreneurship engineering courses on campus and recruited a few engineering students for Perl. And what it gave us was an opportunity to work with marketing students and industrial designers on an industry consulting project. Each semester it tends to be a different project. And I liked it so much the first time, I really got interested to it, I considered sort of, getting a double major in industrial design. And so sort of that was my sophomore year, and now I finished my undergrad in engineering. I didn't do that, but I'm a master's student in industrial design. And so this time, now it's my 3rd time in the Perl course, and I'm helping the students go through it. So I'm sort of the project manager for the course. But I think it's a really valuable course. I think it's a course that a lot of students tend to struggle in because it's very new for them. They're being forced to collaborate with people from different disciplines, and although maybe an engineering student sort of has a rough idea of what a marketing person is, they don't really know what they're capable of maybe contributing to their part of the project. And so it's a process of getting them to collaborate and sort of learning to appreciate what the different team members can provide, and working together to create something that's much bigger than a typical project they would do. So this semester, our project was from Dell, which I assume most people are very familiar with the bigger project, at least the people here. But I'll just give a brief overview. They sort of asked us to, and it was sort of confusing what they were asking us to do. I think it took me a really long time to figure out really what they were looking for. But they asked us to look at sort of entrepreneurial uses for old laptops. And so the first thing we tried to do was get a bunch of old laptops, and it took a little bit of time, but we ended up getting a bunch of old laptops. I think they're from, I don't know, 2001, 2002-ish, and they're pretty old. We immediately took one apart to see what was inside, finding all the different parts, and thinking what we could do, and it was tough because we didn't exactly understand what they wanted us to do. But at the same time, we were exploring, what the different options were and what we could do with laptops. And sort of along the road, we ended up, Rick actually found a prompt, was really interested in looking into farming, into looking for uses where old laptops could maybe have a use on farms. So maybe on a farm, you have a need for some sort of computing, but you don't need a top-of-the-line PC to do it. And maybe there's a benefit for used PCs, and there's something we were looking at in terms of, right now, Dell will maybe lease computers to a school or to a business, and they have services where they'll provide those computers, and they also have computers that they sell one-off to consumers. And so we were looking at maybe there's a hybrid model that could work really well for farmers, but it could be using maybe potentially used laptops. So that was sort of the rough idea we had, and we ended up coming to looking really specifically at farming, but still that direction we had then wasn't quite maybe what Dell really wanted. And sort of it took us the majority of the semester, at least for me, to figure out what Dell really wanted. And it was that for us to come up with ideas that completely independent of Dell. Dell is just sort of the instigator. They're the catalyst for it. They wanted us to come up with ideas that would somehow use laptops and just prevent them from going into waste, because laptops are still useful after the time where consumers stop using them for their day-to-day things. They go buy a new computer. The old computer is still useful. They don't really have a use for it. They could return it back into a system that could then reuse it and give it a second life in a new way. And so we looked at different ways where you could take a laptop apart, assemble it into something new. We also looked at other methods where you could just have a series of laptops being used in a new way, but it's all in the specific context of farming. So with that, I'll ask Rick and Kristina to come up and talk about sort of a few of the farm visits that we did and the insights we gathered from there and how we moved forward in the project.
Okay, so kind of as Ehsan reiterated to earlier, I think maybe we should talk about how we first arrived at agriculture as being kind of that area that we wanted to further pursue. So I think overall we kind of came up with 3 main realms that we wanted to look into, and then based on Dell's recommendations, we kind of honed in on agriculture. So originally we were looking at both the medical sector, the education sector, and then finally the agricultural sector. Obviously, as you guys know, all 3 of those areas, there's going to be substantial growth, and there has been substantial growth. So looking to kind of utilize these used laptops and then make a new function for them in all of those areas could potentially be both profitable, but also very relevant and ultimately help all those parties involved with it. So after meeting with Dell and kind of talking about that, I think we honed in really on agriculture, both in terms of the university itself. Obviously, we are kind of an agricultural university. We have a bunch of farms in the surrounding area, and I think U of I in particular is very capable of catering to that agricultural need just because we have such a good agriculture program here, and we have such a wide range of both industrial design students and engineering students looking at agriculture on a daily basis. So after we arrived at agriculture, as per Dell's suggestion, Kristina and I both took a pretty fun and elaborate visit to several farms. And I think we found a lot of insight there just because both of us, as you can maybe tell by our dress, are not traditionally from the agricultural field, and we don't really come from rural areas. So it really helped to give us kind of some insight into what are those daily struggles and what do farmers actually need, and what are they looking for in a reusable laptop or in any product that we've kind of come up with. So.
Yeah, so the first farm that Rick and I visited was a very small farm. It's run by a single family, and so they've got a lot going on within about 5 acres that they have. So at that first farm, we were seeing very small amounts of crops, and one of the biggest ideas we had in their basement, they had an issue with their egg incubator, and so they were warming the eggs in the basement. So we came upon this idea of, well, can we use the screens from these laptops to warm the eggs? And then we also saw their chicken coops. And these chickens that are growing, they have to have a certain amount of light while they're growing until they reach a certain stage, and then they can go outside and be in the movable chicken coops. So one of our big ideas came from that. So we're looking at the use of screens for giving these chickens light to grow.
And I think here, too, it's also important to point out that we went on 2 farm visits that day. And the first one, as Kristina kind of mentioned before, was a lot smaller scale, and then the second one was a little bit larger scale. But I think having both those viewpoints really kind of shows that there's at least 2 directions that we can go in. And certainly, had we visited a more industrialized or larger scale farm, I think we would have gotten even more insight, which we kind of touched on a little bit in the presentation. But certainly, on the smaller scale farms, they have their own set of problems, just having a limited amount of workers on the farm and farm hands help them, but also just in terms of the sheer acreage that they have. I mean, it certainly is limited, and that in and of itself comes up with new demands that we're going to need to address, and I hope that we've addressed, here on in. And then certainly the larger scale farm, there's a little bit more room in terms of the communication aspect and in terms of how to connect the whole farm wirelessly. Because, as we kind of alluded to earlier, the smaller farm, people were able to actually communicate with each other one-on-one. Even at the furthest point of the farm, I could wave my hand, and they could probably see me on the other end and realize that I wanted to get in touch with them, whereas on the larger one, that just wasn't really the case.
Yeah, so at that second farm that we went to, the larger one, was about 30 or 40 acres, and it's an organic farm, which was something that made it pretty unique. And so at that second farm, we toured all their crops. We toured a number of greenhouses, and so we came up with yet a number of more ideas. And so in these greenhouses, they're growing these plants from when they're just little seeds. So they have to get to a certain size before they can take them outside and really expose them to the weather outside. And so they need to very closely monitor these plants for temperature inside the greenhouse, moisture content of the soil, for a number of different factors. And they don't have the greatest system for that right now. There's no real way to be monitoring all these things. And so we came up with this idea of something like a sea of sensors. So a lot of these laptops have things in them that will monitor them for temperature specifically. So your laptop can easily overheat, and your laptop actually takes care of that on its own. So we're thinking about using these sensors from inside the laptop, bring them into these greenhouses, and better monitor temperature, moisture, so that if something happens, you can know right away, because you can easily ruin an entire crop, which is what the farmer told us at that first farm, or that second farm. Do you want to talk about some of her anecdotes?
Yeah, and just to take a step back, I think just the realm of organic farming in and of itself, because you are held accountable for a lot more of the standards, to be considered USDA organic, you have to have a lot of documentation both on the livestock that you have on the farm, but also on some of the produce rather that you're producing. So I think that in and of itself also came with some more areas that we could look into, and just being able to really get all that data and get all that information. So should something happen to your crop, or should the USDA come around and say, we need to see the documentation for this set of produce or for this strain of animals, they could really have that be called upon.
Okay, and then we got some more insight. We talked one-on-one with the farmer at the larger, more organic farm, and she was telling us about how she had taken her phone outside with her. She had a smartphone. She took it outside. She was going about her daily business, and it dropped into a vat of maple syrup. And somehow it survived. That was the incredible part. Her phone survived that. But she was talking about how now her husband won't let her take her electronics out to the field with her. She needs to enter information about her organic crops into the computer while she's cleaning them and getting them ready to sell. And she can't really keep that laptop next to that washing station where it really needs to be, where she can enter her information. So she's talking about a need for sturdier products. So maybe we can use these laptops to build something sturdier, something waterproof, something weatherproof that they can use out in the field.
And should something inevitably happen to one of these used units, it's not that bad in terms of you're not losing $1,000 on your new MacBook Pro. You're losing something that was ultimately going to not be viable in the next 6 to 8 months anyway. So the cost effectiveness of that nature really kind of brings it up, and also is a point to consider too. In addition, something that we got from our interview with her that actually came out of her mouth, so we want to give her credit for that, not us necessarily, was that she mentioned something called degree days. So I'm sure some of the farmers in the room maybe know a little bit more about that than we do, but as we understood it, essentially when you're planting your crops and you're starting to put pesticides on them, various pests and other insects, they start to germinate at different points in the season. So after a certain number of days, degree days, where the temperature is above a certain temperature, they will start to actually germinate and lay their eggs and start to actually come out and hatch, and they can affect the crops in a variety of ways from there. So one thing that we hope to kind of push on to the future group, and we'll touch on a little bit, is this concept of degree days. If she could maybe leverage, or if we could leverage this sort of technology to make that process more easy for them, because right now they actually have to go online themselves and type in their location, or their zip code rather, and then they'll choose the most relevant weather station nearest them, and it'll actually give them a printout of how many degree days there have been, and when they actually need to put out the various pesticides in that. So if we could just automate that process, that's another area that maybe we could look into.
Yeah, and so clearly we were not the only members of the Pearl team to go to farms, and so a number of other members went to other farms. So we had people going to the Sustainable Student Farm on campus and other farms in the area, and that's where it came up with some more ideas to present to Dell and some more concepts. So they came upon the issue of communication. So they went and volunteered at the Student Sustainable Farm. They got there, they got some instructions, and then they were left completely on their own. So they were kind of lost at some points, and so they thought there could be a much better system for communicating with the farmhand. So this isn't only applicable to places where someone's coming in and volunteering for a day. So if you need to get in contact with your farmhands, if there's an emergency, if someone gets rolled over by a tractor, which happens a lot more commonly than you would think, then this is something we could really improve upon. And then we also came upon this idea of incorporating education And so a lot of these farms are used for student field trips, that kind of thing. We thought, how can we incorporate these laptops into education? And then we pretty much came up with a set of probably 9 or 10 or so concepts, and then our industrial designers went to work, and they came up with about 60 sketches or so.
Some of which you'll see here. And actually, I just want to reiterate the actual anecdote that one of our colleagues, John, came about this idea. He was actually at the student farm, and they basically just send you out there without giving you any sort of instruction, and he felt really bad because he had no idea what he was doing out there, and he was reluctant to even start doing the process himself for fear that he might ruin something down the road and actually compromise the crop later on. So he just came in and was like, guys, I have no idea what I'm doing. I think we should really focus on this education idea to really give whoever's coming in for the day, whether it's students, whether it's elementary school students, whether it's even new farm hands, just the available education so they know kind of what to do and how to not compromise those crops. So I think education is kind of one of the areas that we kind of reside on for that reason as well.
So we'd like to turn it over to our industrial designer, Keegan, now.
Hi, my name is Keegan McDaniel. I'm a senior in industrial design. I was one of 7 industrial designers on the team, and I'm just going to kind of show you what we did to do our part. And so what we did after we kind of heard about all that research and all the farm visits was we kind of sat down with the team and did some brainstorming sessions and identified the insights and kind of got those down on paper and so we could visualize those and send those to Dell and get the feedback from those concepts. So I'm just going to briefly run through that packet of concepts we sent over. And so these are the different categories that we came up with and categorize all our different insights that we gained from the research and the farm visits. So the first one was a system. And this was kind of the idea of, based off models similar to Netflix, or creating a subscription-based service where people could order computers and not have to worry about them or anything like that. So you would have a replaceable laptop, as they mentioned. If it breaks, you don't have to worry about your $1,500 computer. You're just using a computer that was going to go to a waste anyways. Another idea was kind of networking them, using them as a kind of communications. As they describe these larger farms that are 30 to 40 acres, it's kind of hard to communicate all the way across it. So if there's a way to use these laptops at different stations for them to talk to each other and communicate. Similar to that was just tech outposts that you could use them for other things around the farm. And the next category was GPS. So making these computers a local GPS, making them talk together using their Wi-Fi signals. So you can kind of triangulate. So in areas where it's either you don't have a GPS signal or it's weak, you can kind of use that to help guide maybe equipment or other things like that. Similar to that was tracking the progress. A lot of new tractors have this GPS inside of the tractor, so how could we bring this to other farms that don't have that ability? And this was a similar one, but also kind of just using these computers to monitor throughout the farm, such as the wet spots or weeds or sinkholes. Another idea was monitoring the chicken coops. A big insight gained from the farm was these people have to manually keep track of what they're doing with their chickens. They can't go back to the same spot for a certain amount of time. So kind of using these laptops to make sure that everything's going right and the chickens aren't going back where they don't need to be. The next category was security. This was just the idea of kind of going back with these bigger farms. If you're out there working on the farm and something happens or goes wrong, how can you use these laptops to alert someone in the farm that you need help? Also, security monitoring. These bigger farms, you can't really keep an eye on everything. So if there's a way to use these laptops to, say, look at the electrical fence and tell you if there's a break in the fence so nothing's getting in or out. Similar to looking at the fences, if there's a way just to look at your crops. A big thing was that sprinkler systems can't go not watched on a farm, so if there's a way to monitor those sprinkler systems so people didn't have to sit there and watch them. Next category was employee management. So monitoring employees, if there was a way you could kind of maybe log hours or just log what your employees are doing on these larger farms where maybe they only have people coming in for temporary employment, if you could just better keep track of those people. Going back to security and safety, just looking at different ways to communicate the safety throughout the farm. talking about the other ways you can use technology and integrating other technology with these laptops. So if you can use your smartphone on the farm and then bring it back to these laptops and kind of sync them together. What they were talking about, education, kind of relaying to the workers through video or instructional text and making just the working easier when you go and work on a farm. And then maybe also just improving field communication, taking different parts of laptops, kind of creating a device made for field communication, whether it's louder speakers to hear while you're on the tractor or things similar to that. The next category was data. So this was the idea of using the computers to kind of gather the data, almost a sea of sensors idea that they spoke of earlier, just gathering all this data that's on the farm. So a lot of people are doing this right now manually with just pocketbooks and haven't adapted this technology, so this would be an easier way to get this technology onto the farms. So going back to the sensors, you can kind of create like a cloud system that's becoming popular, put that on a farm and collect from different spots so you could get that just at the click of a button. Also doing simulations, how much you should water depending on the temperature, if there's a way to use older temperatures for that, to make farming easier. Also cataloging livestock. There's a lot of different ways they're doing it now, like tattooing or branding on the ear. And then they're just going back and writing that down in their paperwork if there was a way to incorporate laptops with that, whether it's RFID tags or something similar to that. And also, just the internet. Is there a way maybe in rural areas where people don't have the internet, or in developing countries you can use this for gathering information such as weather so you could know when to water your crops? Tracking and monitoring chickens, like we said before. Also monitoring cows. There's a lot of technology being implemented in farming with cows and milking them, so just using laptops for that. Similar to tracking goats with the RFID or tags. Using them for pest alert systems, such as degree days or detecting and sending alerts if it gets too hot, if there's something you need to do on the farm. Just degree days again. Using these laptops for inventory on the farm, looking at supplies and how you can better keep track of those. Similar to that is just instead of just looking at farming equipment and the location of the field. And the next category was measurement and automation. So looking at a way to just monitor the crops, whether it's the temperature, putting sensors in the soil so you can test humidity inside of greenhouses. Offering a conservation tool for utilizing just the minimum water, if there's a way you can implement that technology we said earlier, just to help save water or just your supplies. Similar to just outdoor temperatures and moisturizers in greenhouses. And so using those sensors that we were just saying, but also monitoring them to a laptop to create a system on the farm. And soil testing, if you could go around and be able to test your soil and easily log that information. And if you could individually monitor different plants within the greenhouse using that technology. And so the next category was education. As they mentioned again, I mentioned earlier, just creating information stations around the farm if you're just going to help out on sustainable farms and you actually know what you're doing and what you can do to help. Maybe it's not so much an information station, but you could bring an individual tool up to these stations and kind of scan them with a QR code so you know what you're doing if you were given a specific task. Or creating these, using a technology similar to Google Goggles where you can take like the webcam on a laptop and kind of scan an area and it would be able to read that and tell you maybe specific spots to work or what to do. And maybe even just using these laptops as a platform for software, developing software to help these farms just grow with education. And so this is kind of just a group of unique concepts. Education for people in rural areas. Computers could provide an educational resource for people in low income or developing areas. Farm in a backpack. Currently there's a program that kind of sends out farm supplies to people in developing countries so they can kind of get all this information in a backpack. So how can we kind of throw in a laptop to help improve that technology? Going back kind of educational, how can we modify the actual laptop to maybe make it more simplified so people can use it as an educational device? Maybe if they're not used to a full keyboard, they can just go and press buttons and easily access that information. Actually kind of putting these laptops on the tractor and using it for stuff like internet communication and maybe just fun for the farmers. Creating a shockproof case, as they said earlier, also these people are worried about bringing these laptops out there. So if there was an accessory we could kind of combine with these laptops so they didn't have to worry about it. They also mentioned this earlier, is the use of the LCD screens for either growing plants using that light or, like they said, using it to warm or light chickens. Next category was games. So entertainment, farmers might have a lot of downtime while they're in the field, so they could have access to entertainment on the go. This was a funny concept. We said, what if we could have entertainment for the animals? They might get bored out there. Creating these laptops, the ability to kind of create educational games, of going with the educational and training, how could it be fun for the people that are donating their time? This was a cool concept. It was kind of like bringing Farmville to life inside the farm. So how can you kind of create a game on the farm to make people want to go to the farm and help out? This is similar again on the tractor. How could you kind of play almost like Pac-Man style on a tractor and kind of use that software to just to help you? So this was what we presented to Dell, and we got their feedback on these concepts. And they gave us a couple different categories that they thought were interesting, and so from there we kind of explored it more. And I'm going to hand it back off to Ehsan. He's going to kind of talk what we've been doing since then. Thanks a lot.
So I want to thank Keegan for being able to flip through 60 slides that quickly and sort of convey the essence of all the different ideas that we came up with. And sort of the goal today is, I mean, we're developing 4 final concepts and presenting them to Dell on Thursday. But what I thought would be most useful is to, instead of presenting those which are still being finished and refined, is to come share this breadth of ideas, because this was sort of our process and our creative process from the different insights and everything that we did. We ended up forming 4 different teams with an engineer, 2 industrial designers, a marketing person, or actually the majority of the, I call them marketing, but they're all advertising this semester, on a team, and they were coming up with different concepts. So Keegan wasn't responsible for knowing all these ideas, but he was able to convey all of them very quickly. So that was very good. Here you're seeing the different team members and sort of the breakdown of what we have. And so the C1 challenge we had was we only had 3 engineers on a project that is very technical. And only 2 of them are our computer. Professor Bull was pointing to me saying I'm also to some degree technical. And we had 1 industrial designer who was very tech savvy. So I considered him an engineer to put him with the engineers and form the teams. And so we came up with all these ideas, and when we asked Dell for sort of direction on really what to do, they sort of turned it back around and told us to figure it out. Because they really wanted us to be driving this, and again, like what I was getting at before, is they just sort of want to prompt us and be a catalyst for us to go down a path. And sort of the students the other week, they were really struggling with the projects and like seeing the progress. And I was trying to remind them that even though a lot of other people are, experts in computers, and we're not experts in computers and recycling computers and things like that, I don't think many people have gone down this route and explored how you could potentially use these laptops in a farming environment. And so since there's a community here and online that is really, in this field, and they're much more experts than us, hopefully can prompt sort of innovations and development there, and I think that's exactly what Dell wanted out of this project. And so we are still developing 4 final concepts, and so one of them is specifically about education. One of them is specifically about the subscription model of using laptops. Another one is with the smart sensors on the farm. How can you incorporate smart sensors specifically for watering, and how does having that smart sensor encourage the use of the old laptops? So it's one thing is repurposing laptops, taking them apart to do something, but another thing is also creating an auxiliary item that then encourages the use of these older laptops and creating a system for that. And the fourth one, yes, the fourth one is taking apart laptops and using the screens as both lighting and potentially heat source for chicken coops. And sort of one of the things they discovered with that, and it's something that needs to be validated, and I think they were in touch with some of the faculty here, was do the different wavelengths of light have effects on the chicken in their growth and the moods that they have, and those various things, and can the LCD screens provide that effect? Can they reach those wavelengths? And so there's a lot of various things we've looked at over the course of the semester, and we're pushing these Final Four, and hopefully making a small dent in sort of this very huge problem. And that was a big thing we really struggled with. Is it's such a huge problem. We're not experts in it. What could we do? And so hopefully that was a little bit inspiring and enjoyable to see. And I think with that, open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much.
I shouldn't really be answering the question. I should have had these guys come back up here.
Okay, if you all want to come up, do we have some questions from the audience? Heather?
Oh. Who did your artwork?
Yeah, so our team of industrial designers, it wasn't just like our ideas per se, but we worked with the team that brainstorming and identifying those insights and just visualizing them on paper.
We have one in the, there's a question in the back here.
Yeah, I have a question. A lot of the functions you displayed use a laptop. Actually, I think they can be easily carried out by like a commercial machine or commercial technique. So what is the advantage to use the recycle use the laptops? Is it really cheaper than the commercial system?
Technical question. Okay, so I mean, that was a big thing we struggled with. And so that was one thing we realized, not all of our ideas actually would get direct benefit from an old laptop. And some of them maybe are a smartphone app, and some of them, like you said, are maybe there's a different solution for it. And so that was a big thing we struggled with, is that we were trying to create ideas for using old laptops, but we were coming up with ideas that were good ideas, but they were maybe requiring something else. And so we would have to go back, and we ended up, I think, hopefully not pursuing those, or ones that seemed like they really needed a different solution, creating a real advantage where an old laptop would be very beneficial, as opposed to having a new system. One thing is, I think, before, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, before the sort of emergence of cloud computing, you would maybe tend to buy a lot of sort of standalone systems for a very technical task. Now companies are just putting out apps, doing things via the internet, and so things are sort of changing in that realm, and I think maybe prompting a change of not buying a very industrial, computerized system that might cost you $20,000 to do something specific, and maybe breaking it down into simpler things that you could just install on another system.
I think also another point that we have arrived on is what we got from talking to farmers and both in our research is that a lot of people are hesitant. I mean, certainly we have smartphones, we have tablets, and we have very capable laptops and systems for doing all that stuff. But a lot of times these farmers are either reluctant to bring that sort of technology out into the field with them, just because if something does go wrong or water gets into it or dust, it can compromise the entire system. So oftentimes they'd be more willing to just use a pen and paper or even use something older technology. So I think using these old laptops, it kind of negates the fear that you're going to ruin like a multi-$1,000 system. But also what we thought strength of using these older laptops were kind of a subscription-based model that we sort of glossed over that in the iterate guys here. if someone was to enter into a subscription with Dell, they could potentially receive 10 of these used laptops with the capable software already included in them. So if you put after 6 months or one gets dropped into a bad money, anything like that, Dell can replace it almost immediately because he has a surplus of them constantly coming in. And it is so much more cost effective to do that than to say, okay, well, you're going to need to replace your iPhone for $300, $400, something like that. So you can offer these a lot cheaper cost breaks that are beneficial to the farmer and Dell. And I think another strength of the subscription model that I kind of touched on in our marketing section was just if you have to keep going and buying a new system year after year, or whatever years puts, you have the chance to sort of switch to a new laptop or a new smartphone or a new tablet just based on price at the point when you need to replace it. So if I go to the store and I say, okay, I need a new laptop, who has the best coupon, who has the best promotion going on? At this time, it kind of benefits a lot of switching from competitor to competitor. So for Dell, one of the strengths that we thought we could use the subscription and use the whole laptops is that you do not have to go in and think about that every time you need to replace it. You're in a contract with Dell, so you know that if something happens, you're guaranteed to get a new one. So it kind of takes that whole competition aspect away and just makes Dell be the centralized provider.
Did you think about any of the concepts for how to do power management? Because I would think that one of the biggest risks of using the old laptops is that old batteries don't necessarily hold charge for very long. And in remote locations on the farms, it could be difficult to have access to power for these technologies.
I think we started out in perhaps the most utilitarian view. We wanted to say solar power, but then obviously, as everyone here knows, solar power is super expensive, and for Dell, that's not really going to be an affordable option even for the farmers to integrate source solar power. It never really worked. So in terms of those actual outposts that we came up with, and as you saw in the sketches, the standalone things, we thought that if the farmers, since they have a supply power back in the farmhouse, if we did just have 4 or 5 batteries that can be charged, throughout the week, that could actually go in at the start of each morning when someone first goes out to the outpost. If the battery is dead, they could just simply take that battery out of the back and then put the new charged one in, and then take the old one back to them, the farmhouse at the end of the day, and then just plug it back in the charge. Since you obviously have a lot of the same laptop model going on the same power source, and I think there was other knowledge of this.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely another good issue that you touched on. It's something that we struggle with, and part of it is, yes, we want to service these computers around the farm, but they may still need to be close to a power source. And that was something like we looked at, solar power. It's tough to provide a laptop with the energy that they need, but also with something like this, you need to be really smart with the software that's running, and that considering the battery. And that was a big thing. And another thing is, and I think it's coming. It's not here yet, but much more efficient batteries that we don't need to worry about things like that, where the battery's only going to last 30 minutes. And I think part of this, with this project that we struggled with, we kept thinking specifically of how 5-year-old laptops are. But we weren't thinking 10 years from now how 5-year-old laptops are. And that's part of it, is because we're looking at the past, but it's sort of like the past in the future. So in the future, what are the old laptops going to be like?
All right. A lot of your ideas involved using the computers as actual computers, and we've all used old computers here. We know it can be a kind of frustrating experience. Through your experience, did you guys find a way to interact with these computers in such a way that you're not tempted to put your fist through the screen every couple of minutes because it's going painfully slow or something? And sort of a follow-up to that, in an age of a $200 netbook computer, which probably has considerably more power than these old recycled laptops, do you think you'll be able to convince farmers that you'll get this slightly cheaper, older recycled laptop to do all these things? That's kind of a hard sell, saying, or you could get this little netbook that'll do it with probably a lot less headache down the line.
I think again, that's a really good question, and it is a struggle, and so part of what we try to do, although a lot of our ideas were using them as computers. We try to, at the same time, come up with other solutions that are not doing them, are not using the computers in that traditional sense. So the team who is now working on the sensor idea, the smart sensors, they're using, for one station, they're using 2 old laptops. One old laptop they take apart and put inside the system, and it's running inside the system, and then so that's taken apart and it's using the components. And the second one is outside, so it's an interface. And again, that is something that we really struggle with, and I think it all comes down to the implementation of it specifically and the specific tasks. And a big part of, I think, was going to enable a lot of these was not doing a lot on the computer itself and doing a lot of things via an internet connection. And so you would, yes, be reliant on the internet, but less reliant on the computer and using it more as an interface.
Sort of a follow-up question. Did you guys find, when you were doing this, did you stick with the standard operating systems that were on the computers, or did you try and find a sort of low-power operating system that would maybe be more appropriate for these older machines?
So we didn't really dive very deep in at that level. But that was one thing we were definitely looking at is a lot of these laptops, at least the way they are currently, will not have a hard drive. And so that was a big thing I forgot to touch on is sort of the original problems we were getting laptops without hard drives. What do we do with that? And so the big thing that we looked at is just having Linux running off USB. The device could potentially enable you to do a lot and make things very, very simple. And that way you could have the farmer do everything on a USB, and it's almost plug and play. Obviously, there's a lot of things to figure out there, and I have to say that we didn't really dive in those sort of details.
And do we have any other questions?
Since Dell's doing the research, are you just using Dell computers, or are you using a wide variety of them, like Hewlett Packard or some of the other ones?
So far, just the computers we were able to get a hold of were all Dell. But we actually weren't doing too much with the ones we had. A lot of our work was, I guess, very conceptual. And we did take apart their laptops to see what was inside and how they were working. But again, a lot of our work, it's in the early stages.
Right.
We explore a lot of different things, come up with ideas, and they need to be explored.
Right. So will Dell support the other one? I mean, as you guys gradually go on, will they support the other laptops too, or how's that? I'm just saying there's a lot of other brands out there.
Right. I don't know. It's a good question.
William and the students can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the original concept was that this grew out of Dell's recycling program, and the computers without hard drives were ones that they received from government agencies. So the hard drives had been removed and destroyed for data security purposes. And so that's why they're using Dell laptops virtually exclusively, because it's part of the Dell recycling program. Is that correct?
I have a response to your question, too. I think when I looked at it more as a conceptual base, was also in that position of Dell. Certainly, the farmers, computers, certainly graphic designers, and Apple, I think mathematicians and engineering, they have their own brands like Hewlett Packard and anything IBM. I think there was really kind of an opening in the market for who is really here for the farmer. I mean, certainly we have softwares that are geared towards farmers, but there really has been no explicit company that's gone out and said, I want to represent the farm segment of computing. So I think that in and of itself really presented a good opportunity for Dell to kind of jump on the bandwagon early on. Because one of the things that I didn't know is that these farmers are more technologically savvy than I am. And I think that was really eye-opening for me that there are people out there that really know a lot more about this and are willing to try the new technologies that are in the farming segment. So I think just offering Dell and putting them in that position really kind of also points to a picture of claiming that portion of the market. I think could be very profitable thereon. So I'm really kind of happy that Dell presented.
One last thing I want to add, and it's maybe specific to the netbook question, is that I think part of any solution that can use old laptops has to be a systematic solution. It has to be a good service that makes it easy for the client. That's what Rick's really getting at. It has to really be easy, because right now, it is just easy to go buy a netbook or do something with your smartphone or a tablet, like an iPad or something like that. And so it's all about, the way we saw it, it had to be a bigger, unified, easy service that comes with whatever solution to make it useful. Because otherwise you're just going to want to go and buy a new system to do it. And so part of what we were looking at is, okay, these things could be done with a new system, but nothing's really happening right now. Maybe that's an opportunity area for us to do something.
I think, too, what Ehsan is also alluding to is you can go buy an inclusive system that has all of these capabilities, for $2,000, $4,000, even $10,000, that really comes with all the software in the little netbook that you're talking about. But one of the things that we were hoping to get at is that it might be more cost-effective to just have several different units sparse throughout the farm itself, or even at different points in the farmhouse or throughout the process that are utilizing these older technologies, so that if something goes wrong and break, you're not having to replace an entire system, just one cog within the whole system itself. So it might be more cost-effective in that route, just replace that one, rather than having to go buy a new $20,000 system that has all these different components to it, than if something goes wrong. And certainly, just the ruggedness of it. You don't want to have to go buy a new netbook every time something goes wrong, or if you drop it, or anything like that. So I think just having these older computers that are either made to be more rugged, or are just in a state where you just don't really care as much if something were to happen to it, because you can replace it at a cost-effective point, I think also is a partial solution. But certainly, again, I think you bring up a valid point. I think that's something that future teams are going to definitely have to look into at a more systematic and cost-effective levels.
This is more about I got the fun of the project, the experience. I think it was a very fun project. Many years ago, I was involved on a project for my own game. That was to take, we found 1,000 computers from Atari, the old game computer. And Atari was at the beginning a military computer. And the idea that my friends had was to use it for medical applications in Mexico and South America, for like remote hospitals, and clinic that had a need for some computerization and for sending information. I think a farm is a very harsh environment for the application like that, but perhaps there might be some other application that may not be as harsh as the farming, but still a very good computer application for the computer. So like, for instance, in those days, we had ideas for blood analysis, for heartbeat, AKG information, and that sort of thing.
I have a question. So if you're just using the Dell for that, now can you take the Hewlett Packard strings and use it for ticketing?
Contractually, we can't answer that.
So if you did that, see, then you get Hewlett Packard. That's the way you use us for ticketing. We want to get the game too, and we might use Dell's as an incubator when we do our competition.
I want to say to Dell's credit, they've not prevented us from sharing this information, which led to this public seminar. So I think the fact that some of this might be applicable to other systems is fully within the realm. I think, I don't want to not speak for Dell, but I would think the people we dealt with have been very supportive of education in general, and the latter part of education of this project as well. That said, I think we developed a little phrase during the project that just came up with called Farmer in the Dell.
Were there any questions from viewers? Okay. So with that, I think we want to thank our speakers for today very much, and thank them for the project.